And I sat down with the woman who lost the general election to Trump while winning 3 million more votes. I began by asking her to react to just the last 72 hours. For all of us watching this, it sometimes feels like you can't make heads or tails, or you can't keep up, or you can't process it. And I wonder if it feels the same for you.
No, it feels different for me. Because every time I see him do or say something, I know it's a deliberate choice that he's making at the expense of something else.
You think that?
Yes, I do.
This is a point of tremendous contention in the world of Trump analysis.
No, I know, and it's like being a Kremlinologist. You're a Trumpologist, but I've watched him quite closely. So let's take what you just said.
Yeah.
He clearly doesn't want to talk about Puerto Rico. More than 3.5 million American citizens, along with the U.S. Virgin Islands, not interested, doesn't say a word about it. Now, FEMA is down there. I've called on him to send the Navy, particularly the naval hospital ship called U.S. Comfort. I really think that would be a big help. We don't hear a word. And we don't hear anybody high up in the administration. You don't hear from the vice president or anybody else. So he doesn't think that has any political relevance, and it's certainly not personally important. He attacks black athletes, as he did, starting with his rally in Alabama, continued on Twitter. And he attacks them for protesting peacefully for equality, for standing up for what they believe. And he does it, once again, to dog whistle to his base and to try to detract attention from other things that are going on. But it's quite telling that he is willing to attack black athletes. He never says anything of an insulting manner toward white supremacists or neo-Nazis or Ku Klux Klanners or Vladimir Putin, right? And then we've got North Korea, which is looming over us and which has continued to escalate verbally, with him sort of pushing it along. I don't understand what their strategy is, and now we've got the North Koreans saying, well, if he's going to talk like that and essentially declare war against us, we're going to believe we have the right to shoot down American planes. Now, all of this is swirling around at the same time, but he's making choices. And his choices are to continue to stimulate, motivate, and get the acclamation from his hardcore base that he saw in Alabama and that he continues to reach out to. And it's almost without regard to the consequences of trying to denigrate American athletes for exercising their constitutional rights, for continuing to pick rhetorical battles with North Korea. It is something that he instinctually, viscerally does. But I think there's also a calculation to it.
This is really interesting to me because I think this is a central analytical question about how this individual operates, because there's these kind of two theories of him. One is that there's this he's this kind of accidental maelstrom, that these sort of variety of factors in broader American life have put him in this position. And the other is that he's quite a canny manipulator.
I'm with the second.
You are with the second.
Yes. And now, sometimes his canny manipulation gets out of control,
right,
and even he goes too far. But he was a canny manipulator when he became a birther. That was not accidental.
Right.
That was deliberate. He was a canny manipulator when he started his campaign, basically insulting immigrants and calling Mexicans rapists and criminals, and you can go on and on. It was designed to really attach himself to enough of a core of Republican voters that he would get the nomination, and then he would go from there. And along the way, he would say things like, we're not going to touch Medicare, we're not going to touch Medicaid, all of which he had, no real allegiance to. So he's,
as one can see, is what's happening
as we can see in real time. And so therefore, I think he was manipulating on behalf of himself, and he wanted to plug into, look, the dark underbelly in American politics. It's been there forever. It's not a new phenomenon, but what we have done over time is to try to contain it and prevent it from, being too big a voice in our politics.
It's funny you say that because there was this quote today that was sort of perfectly, I think, buttons us up. This is someone talking to White House reporter Jim Acosta, who says, Trump advisor tells me POTUS is winning the culture war. This is after this weekend in which he's fighting with athletes. Just made millionaire sports athletes his new Hillary Rodham Clinton.
I don't know who would have said that to Jim Acosta, but I'm sure that's what a big slice of his advisors, both inside the White House and now outside the White House, believe.
Right.
Because his whole campaign...
But does it work?
Well, it worked well enough to get him the nomination. With the help of Jim Comey and the Russians, it worked well enough to get him elected, as I write in my book, because, yeah, I think that the way he positioned himself and his, really outrageous language, his insults and attacks, all of that, you could not take your eyes off of him. I mean, nobody could figure out what he would do next, which by definition kind of controlled the audience, right? And so he was able to keep slamming. And so everything bad that was said about him, everything that anybody reported about him, whether it was bankruptcies or defrauding elders and defrauding students, the whole 9 yards.
Or the ads that you guys ran of his own words, which
using his
essentially
own
was,
words.
Look,
yes.
The argument was, prima facie, this is not a person who should have nuclear.
Right. Well, yes.
I mean, you literally ran it out like
somebody, who tweets, right? Shouldn't have
and yet,
codes.
I mean, that's the question, right? Because it all seems like he's playing these 40-60 politics, meaning 40% of the public's with him, 60%'s against him, which shouldn't work in a majoritarian democracy, and yet is somehow working.
But think about this, Chris. His first goal is to try to control the Republicans as much as he can. And so what he's doing with that 40%, which still remains a supermajority of Republicans, is to control the party, control his chances going forward, try to discipline or jettison Republicans who don't agree with him by threatening to get them primary opponents or threatening to support the most radical Trump loyalist in a race. So he's trying to maintain that Republican core.
But I guess the question here is like, and I've read your book and enjoyed it quite a bit. I think it's got a sort of tone that's rare in these kinds of books. It's sort of intimacy to it.
Thank you.
That there's this sort of push and pull, even within your understanding of what happened, the degree to which this was a fluke or not a fluke. I mean, when you say absent Comey and the Russians, right, he wouldn't have won. So it's like at one level, there's something he's doing that really is rewriting the rules of American politics.
I agree with that.
And it's also the case that he was the beneficiary of a bunch of exogenous shocks.
Right.
And so I guess the question is, when you think of where he is now politically, how do you read his political strength? Because those two frameworks still seem to me you could bring to bear.
Well,
you can make an argument for either one, that he's strong or weak.
But look at what he's doing. What he's doing is trying to double down on what worked for him.
Yes.
Take me out of it, and thanks for the nice compliments about the book, but part of the reason I wrote it was so that people who care about our democracy and our future will read it and learn some lessons, and here are some of the lessons. He is doubling down on voter suppression. Now, he knows that if he can restrict the electorate, and all of his Republican allies know, they will have a better chance of retaining control in the states and beginning to try to, expand that reach because they will have shrunk the electorate. This is one of the most serious insults that you can imagine to a democracy that is supposed to be one person, one vote, and which, we have a Voting Rights Act, which the Supreme Court gutted. Secondly, they learned a lot from the whole Russian intervention. And we're now learning a lot of what they learned. What happened with Facebook? I mean, being paid in rubles was sort of hard to believe at first, but now it's become kind of emblematic of what was going on. They understood far better than I did, because it was new, that they could ally themselves with very big, powerful forces like the Mercers and Cambridge Analytica and the Russians and WikiLeaks, and there could be a really, very impressive, strong coalition, all with the same goal, to help him and hurt me. And so they were able to see in real time the results of that. And one of the things I try to explain in the book, and I hope that we'll get to the bottom of this publication of stolen emails were weaponized. They didn't just go out into the atmosphere. They were weaponized. The worst case is the whole Pizzagate tragedy in Washington, and thank goodness nobody died when that young man showed up with his automatic weapon. So they've learned things that work. Double down on suppression. If you can, continue to get help from the Russians, and he's got to be at least contemplating that, because he sure isn't saying anything negative about them, but at least learn the lessons from them.
So I'm very curious to hear your honest gut version of what your theory is on this, and I'll tell you what mine is first, because I was a person who thought for a long time that the Russians and the Trump campaign had coincident interests, and because they had coincident interests, which is they both wanted Trump elected, there was no reason for them to collude, because all the oars are rowing in the same direction. So the Russians are doing what they're doing to elect Donald Trump, Donald Trump's doing what he's doing to elect Donald Trump, and if they're working together, and then the Don Jr. email came out. And for me, for my own sort of personal theory that I walk through my day with, it changed things. Because I thought to myself, well, you get an email saying this is part of the Russian government. You believe there was collusion, right?
What I believe is that there was communication, there was ongoing contacts, which the Trump team went to great lengths to try to hide, which does raise questions. I believe that the weaponization of WikiLeaks was incredibly strategic, and that there had to be somebody with good information advising where that all went on Facebook and beyond. So I think we have to wait and see what the investigations prove, but...
Okay, but I want to push a little on that, because that's sort of a politician's answer in the sense of you have... Well, no, I'm just saying that I feel like when I hear you give interviews on this topic, that I'm not asking you like your definitive take. I'm saying inside the mind of Hillary Clinton, when I wake up in the morning, if you think, did they collude? I think, yeah, they probably...
If it quacks like a duck, it's probably a duck. But we only see feathers.
I understand that you're...
We only see feathers right now.
But you think they did?
I think that all arrows point in that direction. And I think that as we learn more every day, this latest Department of Homeland Security announcement about the probing into our electoral rolls in all these states. And I'm still not quite sure what we're not being told, because there were lots of gaps in the statement that was made, raises all of these questions. So we do know that Putin and the Kremlin wanted to help. We do know that rubles paid for ads on Facebook. We do know that WikiLeaks is a wholly owned subsidiary now, unfortunately, of the Kremlin in terms of what they're willing to do for Putin.
How do we know that?
We know that because there has been a lot of evidence of information that might have been damaging to Putin and oligarchs, none of which comes up. We know that the Republican National Committee was probed. Some people think information extracted. We never saw any of that. So this is one of these arguments that you just build it brick by brick by brick. But I think what's important is that the congressional investigations, special counsel go forward. I'll tell you what I would have done if the shoes had been reversed, so to speak, and I had been the beneficiary by some foreign government. I can't even imagine what it would be. I would have immediately launched an investigation, having a commission with full subpoena powers, leaving nothing unchecked, because we don't really know, do we, Chris? And if we don't know, and we have a government that is woefully, just painfully indifferent, hostile to knowing, it's going to keep happening. And, you know, it's one thing to say, oh, okay, well, I didn't vote for Hillary Clinton, so that's okay. If the Russians helped defeat her, fine. It will not stop there. I mean, the point that Putin is trying to make is that democracies are unstable, unpredictable, that there are divisions within democracies that we paper over with, you know, quaint concepts like the rule of law, and that he wants to undermine us, undermine Europe, undermine the Atlantic Alliance. That has been his life's work.
But there's a psychological aspect to this that I would like to hear you respond to, right? Because part of the problem with this argument is that ultimately the people that made the decisions are American citizens who went and pulled a lever in one direction. And I've seen you talk about the ways in which you feel that this was weaponized against you in favor of Bernie Sanders, particularly with the timing of the DNC hack, the way it was weaponized against you in favor of Donald Trump. But do you recognize why how hard it is to tell people fundamentally they were manipulated when they feel like, and I think justifiably and rightly, whichever decision they made the decision because of the decision they made, right? I mean, it seems like part of the problem with this argument is that not only do you have to say, well, the Russians did all this nefarious stuff, but also you, American citizen, you were a dupe. You got duped.
No, I don't think that's how you say it at all, Chris. That's not how I say it. I don't blame voters. I don't blame voters who woke up and saw that Jim Comey was reopening an investigation and didn't know what to think. And I know very well that stopped my momentum and cost me votes, and I think was the determinative factor in my defeat. I don't blame voters who are searching, Googling, trying to find out information that will help them make a decision, who are being told that the Clinton Foundation, one of the most highly regarded charitable organizations by all of the groups that make these ratings, was, stealing money, paying for my daughter's wedding, these total lies. Propaganda is meant to influence people.
Right.
And sometimes the people are really trying to understand, and they're not getting contrary information. And if it's on your Facebook feed, if it looks like a real news story and you get it over and over again, who's to say that you're supposed to immediately disbelieve it?
Right. But I guess what my point is that you can understand why. Because if that's the case, if I feel like, well, I was successfully propagandized, me as a citizen, right? Like, that's a hard thing to wrestle with.
Well,
what do I do with that,
but we've done it for years with negative advertising, without any help from the Russians, and all kinds of negative ads have been very successful. That's why people keep pouring money into them. Negative ads are one thing. We can bemoan, what one side says about the other. That's fair game, and then you respond. But when you don't even know that stolen information is being weaponized,
the origin of it,
when there is no disclaimer that this is really a piece of propaganda on behalf of Trump and his campaign, then I don't blame voters for, saying, well, maybe there's something to that.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.